All right, my name is Jack Earnhart. For the past year, I've been in collaboration with the Vocal Science and Analysis Lab here at the England Conservatory of Music. I've been engaged in the study of what I'm beginning to call performance physiology of brass playing. This semester, my primary goal has been to better understand the abdominal and ribcage physiology and the respiratory cycles of brass playing. This interest took the form of an observational study using respiratory inductance plethysmography. I want to start giving a brief introduction as well as an overview of the study, as well as providing details of the methodology. Then I'd like to pivot to a discussion and provide conclusions from this study. This study displayed a proof of concept which demonstrates that variability in brass playing respiratory mechanics can be precisely measured. Data gathered from this study will be used in future iterations of the study to fuel hypothesis-driven investigations of multiple parameters that impact brass playing. This is significant because it has the potential to be transformed into a tool for evidence-based teaching in the field of brass pedagogy, which is something that isn't often seen, but it's something that I'd like to see incorporated to eliminate, I guess simply speaking, guesswork in pedagogy, which is a really interesting way of looking at approaching technique in brass playing. I'd like to ask everyone to consider briefly why air is important in brass playing. Similar to the process of phonation in the voice, the lips are propelled open by a positive increase in intraoral pressure generated from lungs. This sudden introduction of the intraoral pressure causes the lips to open, which results in a displacement of an air mass that sits directly outside the lips, which is confined to the cup of the mouthpiece, which is, as you see right here. And the rim acts as a type of interface between the lips and the instrument. This results in a pressure differential, which causes the lips to sustain oscillation. And there's a relationship between intraoral pressure and the note being played. All this is to say is airflow is needed for brass performance. All major methods of brass and voice ped discuss the characteristics of the breath at some length. And currently there's an active tension in the field of brass ped concerning the duties of the abdominal and chest regions. So some methods of brass playing will posit that the chest has to be held upwards to the conclusion of the playing breath. The evidence for that is that the anatomy works the way, quote, it is supposed to. Other methods will say that the abdominal area should be forcibly pulled in towards the spinal cord, and this helps to generate that needed intraoral threshold pressure to play throughout the range of the instrument. This study is investigating the respiratory processes of 8 college-level brass players to simply see what's going on. A variety of technical exercises were used to simulate most playing situations, so giving forte dynamics, piano dynamics, both low and high, and using tongue and breath attacks. For my non-brass playing friends, a tongue attack may be defined as a played note where airflow to the lips is controlled by a release of the tongue that is synchronized with the beginning of the exhalation. And a breath attack might be defined as a played note where the airflow simulates lip oscillation without the assistance of that synchronized placement and retraction of the tongue. Data were gathered using audio recording equipment along with the RespTrack respiratory inductance plethysmography system. And as my colleague Emma noted earlier, the RespTrack uses 2 inductance bands to measure expansion and contraction of the abdominal and ribcage regions. Data were analyzed using automated RStudio coding, RespTrack output derivative graphing software, and the RespTrack signal analysis interface. Data were transformed from the raw RespTrack signals into overlaid ABRC charts, that is, abdominal and ribcage charts, so that the relationship between the 2 areas could be observed visually. Before taking a look at those graphs, it is important to note that while the RespTrack measures region expansions and amplitude, the data in this study has been standardized with in-person based off individual means. Now, observing abdominal and ribcage signal overlays, we see that there is some variation by test subject, by instrument, and by dynamic, but there are a few trends that remain the same across the entire chart. Yes? Okay, great, appreciate it. I want to talk about those for the remainder of the time. Some test subjects displayed interesting trends that required use of a derivative graphing software for better understanding. And the application of this abdominal and ribcage signal derivative graphing displayed a type of mirror-like interaction between AB and RC signals. So while the bulk of the players showed expansion in the inspiratory phase of both the abdominal area and the ribcage area, a single test subject showed retraction of the abdominal area while the chest area expanded. So I'd like to take a look at that right now. What you're looking at now are the derivatives of the RespTrack signal data. The abdominal area is shown in red. The sum of the abdominal and ribcage area is shown in green, and the ribcage area is shown in blue. So we see while right before the attack of the node occurs, the abdominal area is coming in as the ribcage area is expanding at a fairly mirror-like trend. It's quite interesting. So I want to talk about that a bit more. During exhalation, various abdominal muscles, along with the internal and external obliques, so the area of the abdominal muscles that sit below the ribcage, help in displacing the abdominal content. These contractions force the diaphragm upward, which increases the radius of curvature. While this would normally cause a sympathetic expansion of the ribcage area, the downwards contraction, or rather the hypothesized downwards contraction of the internal intercostals are able to resist this shift through contraction. Additionally, they serve to decrease the lung volume, or to decrease the volume of the thoracic cavity by effectively squeezing the lungs during expiration. Other anatomical structures work in tandem with the muscles involved in forced exhalation to create a sound in a brass instrument. Going back to look at the derivative graph here, we see that this is absolutely occurring. When the abdominal muscles come in, it's going to cause, due to the incompressible or largely incompressible nature of the abdominal area, the rib cage is going to expand, but the internal intercostals are resisting this expansion at the start of the playing note. So observing in this derivative graph, I would expect to see a continuation of the upwards ribcage derivative. That's not the case at the moment of inhalation. Instead, it reduces. So the internal intercostals are actually bracing for impact as it is. So that observation was really interesting, and it forced me to really pivot when looking at when writing my conclusions. That being said, I'm happy to offer 3 conclusions from this study. 1, there is a relationship between abdominal area contraction and range. As range increases, the abdominal area exhibits increased contraction. I'm hypothesizing that this is due to the fact that increased abdominal contraction is generating higher intraoral threshold pressures for the sounding of each note. Number 2, as we just discussed, the duties of the rib cage, like the abdominal region, are complex. 3rd, combined abdominal contraction surrounding the start of note attacks, coupled with the inferred intercostal or the internal intercostal engagement to resist that RC expansion, appears to be the most common method of inspiration and attack in the observed samples to generate the needed pressures required of brass playing. Again, what significance does this study have in its applications to brass ped? It's providing evidence-based pedagogy. So instead of guessing what's happening intraorally or in the abdominal region, the ribcage region, we now can put numbers to this. So I'm hoping that this sparks the beginning of, say, a normative brass ped system, which is really exciting, and it's something the field has not seen a lot of. And I'll be excited to see how this transforms in the future. Moving on to the last slide. In the future, I'm looking forward to investigating other factors alongside the RespTrack data. possibility for study would be the relationship between intraoral pressure and strain in brass playing, coupled with measurements from the RespTrack system. I want to thank you all very much for Thanks a lot for your time. We have used most of the time for the presentations, about 3 minutes remaining, so I'd like to field any questions. Yes?
So I have a